Folks, this is getting out of hand. I never thought that this would happen in a million years, but it appears that World War III may actually be started by Israel attacking Russia. I never thought it would be that direction. I never thought it would be I never thought our breaking point would be Israel attacking Russia, of all places. Ukraine and Russia, okay, yeah, you can see that. Israel and Iran, okay, yeah, you can see that. I did not see Israel versus Russia coming, but yet here we are. There were reports that have been unconfirmed by both Russia and Israel, but if this really happened, you can understand why they wouldn't want to talk about it publicly. But there was video. We have video from Latakia, Syria, where Russia has a base of planes flying over and things exploding. It seemed to be a bombing run. Now, who would be bombing Latakia, Syria? Who has an air force that would want to blow up a base in Syria? Well, obviously, it would be Israel. Israel bombs Syria all the time. The difference, though, is that this base in Latakia was a Russian base operated by Russians and Iranians. But, Russia and Iran, as well as Hezbollah, have been working to support Assad's government in Syria for at least a decade. So this is nothing new. There have been Russians in Syria, Russian bases in Syria, and Israel has been bombing Syria for as long as I can remember. This is the first time I ever recall them bombing a Russian base and potentially killing Russian people, or at the very least damaging Russian assets. And then we've got video of the Russian ambassador to Israel talking in an interview about how, if you're a Russian citizen and you're in Israel right now, it might be a good time to get out. There's still flights between Russia and Israel, and I'm just saying, you never know when that might stop, so maybe now's the right time to go home. And so these two things, happening, it's setting off alarm bells for me. Israel has a population of, I guess you could at the very least just call them Russian speakers. You want to be as specific as possible. People, the percentage of the Israeli population that speaks Russian is 15% apparently. So I don't know if all of those are Russian citizens. They could be from other Russian-speaking countries. And some of them, could be born in Israel and just, they speak Russian at home because that is their language. But Russian Jews were a very substantial cohort of the founding generation of Israel, back in 48. Russian Jews have always been pretty prominent in Israeli society, and so it never occurred to me that Israel would just have any sort of conflict like this openly with Russia, because they are, partially themselves Russian as a nation. And up until this point, you've always seen cordial relations between, Putin and Netanyahu, the two modern leaders of those two countries. Both of them have been in power in their respective countries for about the same amount of time. Both came to prominence in the late 90s, at least at the national level. I mean, Netanyahu was a somewhat prominent figure going back further than that. I seem to recall that, he was even on, Bill Buckley's show in the 80s or something, representing Israeli interests. But as a national leader, as prime minister, I believe the first time he became prime minister was I want to say 97? And then Putin, when was he become president? 99? And both of them have had short stints where they were not, the head of their government. For a few years, Dmitry Medvedev was president of Russia because Putin was term limited. And Netanyahu has spent at least a couple of years, over the last 25 years or so, not being prime minister. But most of that time, any given time I can think of in the past, you think, oh, who's the prime minister of Israel? It's almost always Netanyahu. And so these two men know each other very well. And so this was not on my radar at all. But then it happened. And suddenly, the next day, it apparently happened again. A base operated by the Vagner Group, which, for all intents and purposes, is the Russian government. The owner of the Vagner Group was a close Putin ally, and then they had some sort of falling out, I'm not really sure. And then Putin exiled him and took over the Vagner Group. And then he died under suspicious circumstances in a plane crash. But anyway, yeah, the Vagner Group, Russian military, they go hand in hand. Then Israel bombed a Wagner base, which, again, the one thing both of these bases have in common is not just Russians, but Iranians. And of course, you would imagine this is a response to Iran's missile strike from a couple days ago. And so it seems that Israel is drawing a line and saying essentially they are not going to tolerate Russia being friends with Iran anymore, even though Russia has been an ally of Iran for, again, as long as I can remember. And Russia has managed to be a friend of Iran and Israel for all this time. It's been quite remarkable. I was impressed by that Russia was able to achieve that, but I guess that's no longer the case. It would seem now that Israel and Russia are enemies. Israel is hell-bent on taking down Syria, taking down Iran, and taking down, at the very least, Hezbollah in Lebanon. I don't know how close the Russians are directly to Hezbollah. I don't think Hezbollah really has its own foreign policy. Hezbollah is... everybody, pretty much agrees. They are the one true Iranian proxy. Most of these so-called Iranian proxies, it's a bunch of nonsense. They're people who happen to be Shiite Muslims who happen to own guns, and so the American media likes to just lump them in with Iran like they're exactly the same. But in the case of Hezbollah, they wear the same dress as Iran. They love to talk about Iran. They want to be Iran's best friend. They work very closely together, so it's fair in that case. But anyway, Russia, in contrast to what Israel's been doing, Russia's been sending humanitarian aid to Lebanon. They haven't been sending weapons, but they've been sending aid and publishing that openly. RT is doing stories on it. Oh, look, Russia's sending aid to Lebanon in their time of need. So needless to say, this is very bad, very, very bad indeed. We do not need another American ally joined at the hip attacking a nuclear power, Russia. In this case, the same nuclear power that the other American proxy, that's what Ukraine is. I wouldn't call Israel an American proxy because I don't think that the Americans have control over Israel. I think Israel is acting as it wishes. A lot of people argue that America is actually Israel's proxy. I don't think that's the case. I think that's an oversimplification. I think that Israel has by far the greatest influence over our politics compared to any other country. Saudi Arabia has a lot of influence here, but it's pales in comparison to the influence of Israel. Great Britain had an outsized influence here for a very, very long time, more so than people ever appreciated, after World War II. In the wake of World War II, Britain basically exported their foreign policy to us, and we had to take over doing what Britain was doing before and meddling in the rest of the world. That's where all that came from. Think of the 1953, I think it was, coup in Iran. Who did that help? Whose interests were we serving by overthrowing the secular government of Iran? Oh, that's right. It was British Petroleum. It was Great Britain. Who were we helping to secure by establishing NATO and drawing a bold line down the center of Europe, telling the Russians so far and no further? We were, of course, serving the interests of Great Britain, because Great Britain wanted a buffer zone between them and their enemies. They did not want any more hostile powers just across the English Channel. But anyway, I'm getting way off topic. The point is that Israel has enough influence over the United States that if Israel gets itself backed into a corner, into a war that it can't win, taking on Russia, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, and Hamas all at once, it's going to be the United States who is compelled to come bail them out. I definitely think that Israel's influence over our politics, our foreign policy, it's easily enough to get that done. Our leaders are primed for it. They're salivating. Our leaders want nothing more than to go to war with Iran and Russia. And Israel, their favorite little so-called underdog, getting backed into a corner. That would be the greatest excuse in the world for our leaders. Even Donald Trump, I think, his instinct would be to fight Russia if Israel was fighting Russia. It's that he has no attachment. His party, the political culture in America, on the right, we have no attachment to Ukraine like they do with Israel. In America, across the political spectrum, but especially on the right, it's beaten into your head from a very young age that Israel is like America number 2. They're our little brother, and we are not entitled. We are obligated to protect them, even when they're wrong, because they're our family. And the irony is that American Jews make up, from what I understand, like half the population of, Russian Israelis. There's a lot more Russians, people of Russian descent, people immersed in Russian culture in Israel than there are Americans. So if anyone were to make that case that Israel's their little brother, that Israel is their kin, it would be Russia, which is why I find it so bizarre that this could be happening. And I hope that it doesn't. I hope that Putin is tactful enough that he is able to negotiate past this current flare-up. But it feels to me like Netanyahu is he's issued an ultimatum to the Russians. Either you're with us or you're against us. No more playing both sides. It seems that Netanyahu feels strong enough that he is able to impose his will on Russia through force. And if Russia balks at this ultimatum and armed conflict between Russia and Israel begins in earnest, I don't think even Donald Trump would be able to get us out of that. I think there would be way too much pressure on Trump to do the opposite. And I don't even think that Trump's instincts necessarily, would tell him that peace is paramount in that situation. I mean, listen to what Trump just said. He, yesterday, what happened? Joe Biden said, hey, Israel's going to retaliate against Iran for that missile strike, which in and of itself was Iran retaliating for something that Israel did earlier, and so you see how these things go. It's just violence begets more violence. Anyway, Biden said it's really important that Israel not attack Iran's nuclear sites because, of course, bombing a nuclear power plant is insanity. It would cause a nuclear meltdown. It would cause environmental disaster that could affect who knows how many other countries other than just Iran. And even if it only affected Iran, who knows how many thousands or millions of people would be poisoned by the radiation, and what that could. I mean, there's a reason why we don't bomb nuclear power plants. I mean, even as recently as the war in Ukraine, people understood this. Like, oh, we don't want anyone shelling the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. When there was a thought that Russia might be doing that, all the pro-Ukraine crowd was talking about how terrible that is, and how irresponsible that is, and how you can't bomb nuclear power plants. Well, now we have Joe Biden saying, yeah, Israel shouldn't do that either. And he's getting attacked for it by everybody, including Donald Trump, who is saying, no, Israel absolutely should bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. That should be their main target. So anyway, this is terrible. Everything that's going on right now is very bad. And it's much bigger than the election. Like, when I read all this stuff, who cares about the election? Really, I could care less if we're all vaporized who the last president of the United States is. Because if Trump is going to be advocating for nuclear brinksmanship, really, what value is he? Because in that scenario, we will all still suffer. Oh, although I should clarify. Obviously, when it comes to trying to deal with Russia, you'd much rather have Donald Trump at the table than Harris if you're talking about trying to negotiate peace to prevent the outbreak of a third world war. So I don't want to seem too hyperbolic. But still, this is not good Trump. This is bad Trump. This is scary Trump. Now, again, it might just be him. Could just be tough talk. And Trump does do a lot of that. But I can't assume that. I'm not going to assume when Trump says something about this, this serious, this dire. I'm not going to assume that he's lying. I'm going to assume he's telling the truth, because you should, until proven otherwise, because it's that serious. This isn't like jokey fun stuff. This isn't, oh, how big is my crowd size? This is nuclear war. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.